bring in senior advisor to the Harris-Walz campaign, Ian Sams. Ian, good morning. So I'm looking at the schedule today. Your campaign is in Wisconsin. Tomorrow you'll be in Georgia and North Carolina. On Sunday in Michigan. And then on Monday in Pennsylvania. No one will be able to accuse you, whatever happens on Tuesday, of not having covered and spent time in the battleground states. So I'm curious for our viewers who are anxious at this moment, and rightly so because this race is so close, how you all are feeling about the race this morning.
Well, thanks for having me. Look, we're encouraged by what we're seeing. We're seeing women voting in record numbers in the early vote. We're seeing the Trump campaign already starting to worry about some of their coalition not turning out in the early vote. And we're seeing late breakers coming our way. Undecided voters are making up their minds and swinging towards Vice President Harris. And I think, you guys have been talking about it on air and showing it. I think we can see why. Donald Trump is talking about putting one of the most extreme figures in our politics in charge of women's health. Undecided swing voters are repulsed by that. Donald Trump is talking about unleashing guns on Liz Cheney, a Republican who's supporting Vice President Harris. I don't think undecided swing voters are really turned on by that as well. So we're seeing increasingly, as we close this campaign, undecided voters who are making up their minds coming to the vice president. We're seeing strong enthusiasm among Democrats. Just yesterday, Gallup is out with a new survey showing a 10-point enthusiasm gap between the Democrats and the Republicans. So we feel really good about where we are. Obviously, it's going to be a really close race. We're in an unprecedented situation where all 7 battleground states are basically within the margin of error. This could come down to 10,000 votes in numerous states, but we're prepared for that. We think that we are on a path to victory, and we're looking forward to winning.
Ian, it seems like the Trump campaign sort of locking arms with Fox News and others and putting blinders on. So if Joe Biden says something about garbage and misspeaks a little bit, they don't remember or avoid the fact that Donald Trump says this country is a garbage can, and among other things that invoke the word garbage. And again, Mark Cuban said something about women. It's all people who bend to Trump's will and seem to put themselves in a category. And with the help of Rupert Murdoch, I actually thought it said, say it to their fascists, but it says, say it to their faces. There's a lot of support here. There's a lot of teaming up to try and make sure misinformation gets out there or avoidance of real stories gets out there as well. And at the same time, this appears to be part of Donald Trump's closing argument. Take a look.
She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. When the guns are trained on her face. They're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy. But she's a stupid person.
He's talking about Liz Cheney. She did release a statement, but I'd also like to hear what the campaign has to say about this. What does this kind of language portend?
Well, you heard the vice president talk exactly about things like this on Tuesday night in her closing argument. Donald Trump is so all consumed by his grievances. The people who he disagrees with and who he sees as opposing him politically, he treats as enemies. He spent the last month talking about the enemy from within the United States. And now he's going after Liz Cheney with this dangerous, violent rhetoric. I mean, think about the contrast between these two candidates. You have Donald Trump, who's talking about sending a prominent Republican to the firing squad, and you have Vice President Harris talking about sending one to her cabinet. This is the difference in this race. You have one candidate who's extending an arm and saying, we may not agree on everything. That's okay. I may make mistakes. You may not like me on every issue. That's okay. But we have to turn the page on this division and this anger and, frankly, the instability that we see from Donald Trump. If we ever want to move forward as a country, if we ever want to get anything done that actually matters for your life, he's going to sit in the Oval Office stewing over his enemies list of people who he perceives as his political opponents, as his enemies. And she's going to sit in the Oval Office and actually focus on a to-do list of priorities for the American people, lowering costs, protecting reproductive freedom. These are the things that she's talking about over and over again in her campaign. We have new polls out overnight from Marist, for example, in the battleground states showing Donald Trump's lead on the economy has been erased. It's because people are hearing from her about her actual plans to bring down costs, while all Donald Trump does is attack his enemies, attack his opponents, talk about his own problems. And we think that that's actually resonating with voters. We think that that's contributing to the fact that undecided swing voters at the end of this race are breaking her way. They are seeing, regardless of the misinformation and the disinformation being churned out on the right, undecided voters, independent voters, even some Republican voters who aren't very comfortable with Donald Trump, they are seeing this rhetoric. They are seeing what happened at Madison Square Garden, and it is turning them off, and it is bringing them closer and closer to supporting Vice President Harris, if not already casting their vote for Vice President Harris.
Ian,
your campaign does seem to be more confident just in the last few days, and I think all of us reporters are hearing some of that. But you look on the Trump side, and already Donald Trump is criticizing the vote as fraudulent in Pennsylvania. He's raising questions about Georgia. He seems to be saying that there is cheating already happening. It seems pretty likely that whatever happens, shortly after the result is called, or even beforehand, Donald Trump will say that he's won. What are your preparations for that moment? How is your campaign going to respond? How much focus and resources are you putting into the hours and days after the close of voting on Tuesday?
Well, it's a good question, but I think when you start this conversation, you have to call it what it is. Donald Trump looks weak. This is a moment of weakness for him. He sees that his numbers are not what they need to be among seniors, among men. He sees the way he's losing women by a historic margin, and he is scared he's going to lose. That is what's driving this. So he's making up baseless claims of fraud even before we get to Election Day, because he's scared he's going to lose this race, and he's desperate to blame anything other than himself. So that is first and foremost what is happening. Now, he is going to try to foment discord. He is going to try to say he won even if he didn't win, and he's going to fail. He did this in 2020. He had lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit alleging fraud, and they all failed. We have hundreds of lawyers across this country who are ready to protect the vote, to make sure that there's election integrity in this election, and to hold Donald Trump accountable. Already right now, we are seeing these sort of press release stunt lawsuits that the RNC and the Trump campaign do. And we're not just sitting around waiting. We're going into court to force decisions early so that we can beat them. We've won 24 cases just in the last month of these bogus claims that Republicans are putting out there, because they're not rooted in fact. And at the end of the day, we are confident that our institutions will hold. We're confident that we will win in court because the facts are on our side. And the only reason Donald Trump is doing this is because he's worried he's going to lose. He's worried he can't win this election fair and square. And it's because he's probably seeing what we're seeing, which is the voters that are going to decide this election are making up their minds, and they're going for Vice President Harris.
Senior advisor of the Harris-Walz campaign, Ian Sams, thank you so much for coming on this morning. We really appreciate it. And